Oh, man. Greetings and salutations. I don't get any feedback as to whether or not my recording stuff is working. But I'm just going to. That was neat. Gave me a little message about live chat. How's everybody doing? Back time walking here. I need a haircut. Jeez. Back time walking here. Miguel, thanks for tuning in again. Quick recap. I'm walking here. I don't know if it's a vlog. I'm into this stuff, but it's turning out to be a vlog, I guess, where I make recordings like once a week, and more and more it's becoming about social issues, because I really think there's a need for like objective. When I say the word objective, I really concern myself that I'm putting myself. It concerns me because I feel like I'm placing myself in a position where one could presume that I'm able to do that, and I'm not able to do that. It's not necessarily objectivity. It's just a different way of looking at things that are going on in the world. And I guess the correct thing to say is not necessarily that it's objective, but that I try to make it positive. Whatever. I don't know. I'm still not good at this. I'm still learning how to do this and whatnot. But today, do a little Super Bowl talk, right? Some of the things that the NFL did to address some of the issues that are going on in the world. People are, unless you've been living under a rock in this country, you are aware that there have been protests taking place in the NFL started last year. Well, it really picked up steam last year with the kneeling during the anthem protest that Colin Kaepernick initiated, and many of the other players too, to address the issue of police brutality, and especially police brutality against African Americans. That message got blown up and distorted into an attack. It got interpreted by somebody, got picked up some steam on the opposite side to counter that protest by stating that the players that were protesting this issue were being disrespectful, right, by kneeling during the anthem. And that then started gathering some steam, and the counter argument against the protest, that became the foundation of the counter argument, and then that is where the message got lost. So I talked about this kind of in the last episode, where when these issues, when race issues come up, issues of race, you can pretty much count on. Am I going the wrong way? Probably should have. Yeah. When these issues of race come up, you can pretty much count on, by like 100%, that there's going to be a counter argument against whatever is being addressed, the issue of race, or that involves race, not the issue of race, but the issue that involves a race, especially African Americans. As of late, Um, the counter argument is going to be something that attempts to get things back in the status quo, which is to not address the issue, but to get things back to attempt to get like the social pulse, or the pulse of the society as we know it back in line to the status quo, which is what everybody, most people are used to. Anyway, okay, that'll have to be like its own episode, talking about the issue of race, that protest, other issues that get brought up, and how there's always going to be a counter argument that makes these things, it's not about you, it's about us, that sort of stuff. It becomes like that'll be another episode. Anyway, so you had that take place in the NFL, and this year during the Super Bowl, the NFL took measures to kind of address both sides of the issue, right? First of all, and this was interesting, I thought this was kind of fortunate for all parties involved that the Super Bowl was held in Atlanta, because these locations are determined like 5 years in advance, I think. 5 years in advance that Super Bowl venues, Super Bowl locations are determined. And it just so happened that after this major social issue here, with the protests and such, that this Super Bowl was held in Atlanta, almost as if, the timing was just perfect. And the reason I say this is because the NFL got an opportunity to not only to address, to recognize the contributions of civil rights leaders in the African American community, which Atlanta was a big, Atlanta was a hub, if you will. It's like where a lot of that issue was addressed in the 60s, right, when the civil rights movement was in full swing. The NFL had civil rights leaders and their families. Dr. King's daughter, Reverend King, at the coin toss. They had like an advertisement, a segment in between a commercial, whatever, in between like timeouts or in between periods or something like that, quarters, where they recognize civil rights leaders and the civil rights movement, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But on the flip side of that, right, like I said, the initial protest, and I really applaud the NFL for doing this, because they did not take the position of let me think. Well, okay, so let me back up. Okay, so anyway, the NFL then took time to recognize first responders. Now, the first responder segments were sponsored by Verizon, and I'm sure the civil rights stuff was sponsored by a major corporation. Somebody's got to make money off of this stuff. But they recognize first responders and their contributions, right? Police, paramedics, EMTs, firefighters, right? There were quite a few segments about first responders. I thought in an interesting take that they did. Geez, I've got my son's right behind me. This is not the time not the time to be walking this direction. An interesting take that they used was that they took players and coaches, active players and coaches in the NFL who had been involved in car accidents, serious car accidents, that required first responders to respond, and shared their stories that they they wouldn't be here if not for first responders. So the NFL and the powers that be not only address the civil rights issue, but they also address the issue with first responders, and specifically, that includes, of course, the that's terrible. Sorry, guys. That includes the police officers, right, who were the other side of the protests, right? Now, they also took a moment to recognize the disrespect of the country counter, right? That's the argument that was being used for in the protest or that took place last season, by recognizing veterans, their contributions, and in an interesting commercial, they took the specialty codes, right, that the military uses for the different jobs in the different branches. For example, like they showed the 2T and the 2B and the 1A2X1, and some branches call it an MOS. The Air Force used to call it an AFSC, an Air Force Specialty Code. Mine was 2A6X6. As an aircraft electrician, electro-environmental systems technician, yada yada blah blah. Yeah, so they made a commercial for that, and they just and it was a veterans looking for veterans for jobs, right? You can run a Google search for your specialty and get hired. But what that does is wait for me to cross here. Thank you. Essentially what that does is it also puts light on the other aspect of that protest that people were using and arguing against. Morning. Disrespectful to vets. Personally, as a vet, I'm not offended by the protest. I can only speak for myself. So when I say I am one of those vets who believes that my contribution, my military service, and my contribution to my country was to preserve the rights of our citizens and preserve the rights of our citizens and ensure that they're able to take advantage of every one of those rights, to include the right to freedom of expression, which includes protest. I am for protest. I am not against it, not one bit, as long as nobody is harmed, right? There's no harm comes to anybody. It's not a big deal to me. I don't invest a whole lot emotionally into that stuff, unless people are saying, like, no joke, like derogatory stuff against a particular group of people, which in this case they were, but they were addressing, I think this is part of the message that got lost. They were addressing, well, for lack of a better word, the assholes within within the law enforcement community, because they're there. They're in there. I watched this one thing where in Houston, God bless them, I hope they're doing okay. Hope they're okay, but I guess some police officers, some law enforcement personnel were trying to issue a warrant in Houston, and they ended up getting shot at. Some of these guys got shot, and I want to say they were in good condition, but somebody may have passed away as a result of that encounter. And somebody, I think somebody represented the Houston Police Department took that opportunity to address the attacks on law enforcement. And although I can understand his frustration and especially his emotion, because those people he probably knew those people personally. I understand how he feels. I mean, from me personally, from losing people suddenly, it's hard not to get emotional about that stuff. You want answers. You want justice. There needs to be repercussions, all that stuff. You're feeling all that stuff at the same time. And he spoke very passionately and very emotionally about that one, about, the increased negative attention that law enforcement are getting. And my opinion, well, not my opinion, it's not about, it really isn't about law enforcement. It's about those assholes that are on the force that are allowed to those assholes on the force that push a little bit too hard, not too hard, that go too far and then covered up. Like, it's kind of like the Catholic Church, right? Like, the Catholic Church is under attack because there have been priests within the Catholic Church that have assaulted kids, right? And the church shuffles the priests around to different dioceses, and because of that, the church gets bad press. Its reputation is tarnished. It's losing parishioners. But the church is under attack. The church is falling apart. The church is being weakened by this stuff, because rather than address the individuals, the position that's taken by this organization is to shuffle, move, band-aid, cover up, right? And the same thing goes for the situation with law enforcement. The same thing happens. I mean, look, there are people who are involved in this argument who have not had any personal experience on either side of this issue. As someone who has had relatives, people who are close to me, have run-ins with the law, who were mistreated, assaulted, beat up for what we thought were not good reasons. I mean, the argument's always going to be, don't resist. Well, I think there are plenty of stories of people who didn't resist and they ended up losing their life over this thing. I don't really have the permission to share like stories of specific people, so I'm not going to share specific stories, but I can tell you that I have family members who, when they were in police custody, got the ever-living shit beat out of them behind closed doors, and it's like, and this person is respected, you know what I mean? He's, or she, is respected in the community, especially respected in our family. And when stuff like that happens, it really breaks the trust. And those are the people that we're talking about. Those are the incidences that I say we. I guess in a way I'm kind of part of the protest too, because I don't knock it. But those are the incidences that you're talking about. Personally, I can tell you I've been involved in situations with the police where they just don't listen, you know? You try to talk to them reasonably, they ask you questions, you have to speak back reasonably, and if they don't get the answer that they're expecting, in the tone that they're expecting, then all of a sudden, you're in trouble. And I don't mean like you're in trouble, shame on you. I mean like you're in trouble. You could be physically harmed, you could be, I mean, you're at that point, you're in danger, you know, you're in danger. So, it's not necessarily about, these types of issues are not, with involving law enforcement, it's not just about, compliance, you know. You catch one of these asshole law enforcement guys on a bad day and you could be in danger. So that's what the protest is about. It's about addressing those people. It's about challenging law enforcement to identify those people and deal with them accordingly. And for me personally, I feel very strongly that they know who these people are. I spoke to one police officer when I was here in Charleston, and I thanked him for his service. I told him I appreciate, you guys doing what you do, because I do. No, it's not an easy job. It's not an easy job. These guys, targets on their back. I felt bad for one dude I tried to say hello to, and I tried to say the same thing to in a CVS parking lot. And he was in uniform, had all his gear on. And when I spoke to him, you could see that he was alert. I was like, oh, no, dude, it's cool. I just wanted to say hello and thanks. And it's because these guys got targets on their back, the good guys and the bad guys. But it's the bad guys that need to get addressed. And the challenge of that protest, and my personal challenge on law enforcement, is to identify these guys and get rid of them. Don't cover them up. Don't cover it up just because he's a good guy. I mean, the same thing happens in the military, Good old boy clubs exist in a lot of places, in a lot of different organizations. And, this issue might be a matter of, good old boy clubs and who you know as opposed to what you know. And these guys have families, and that's the part that gets looked at. Oh, this guy's got a family, You can't be involved in this stuff. You can't ruin his life or his family's life over it. Well, if he's ruining people's lives or she's ruining people's lives because they don't handle because they can't be a professional, then that's not on the police department. That's on him or her. So, man, I really got off track because it's about the Super Bowl and the social issues. Well, I guess I kind of addressed that. I guess I kind of talked about that because I really appreciate, did I say Dr. King's daughter was at the coin toss? They had the civil rights leaders at the coin toss. This is a moment where, this is something that the NFL does, to honor specific people, typically NFL related, old players, old coaches, old contributors, older, of the past. And they took this time to recognize these civil rights leaders and to include a congressman. So, geez, Is my nose running? Sorry, I really need a haircut. But anyway, I say good for you, NFL. I mean, that's good. Now let's get rid of that Redskins name. I don't mean to laugh at the name. It's just that should be the next step. We could change that. I heard it on a podcast. I thought it was a very interesting idea. Like you could change the Redskins, or you could keep the Redskins name, but just change the logo. I can't remember how they made the connection for a potato to Washington, but somehow make like a spud, and instead of the headdress feathers, 2 potato skins, potato peels, like something like that. But yeah, we got to get rid of that name. Got to get rid of that team name. You could say it's part of history and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the truth is that it really is a derogatory term, and I can't quite understand how people keep justifying it, Well, I was going to say something, but I haven't really thought on it too much, so I don't necessarily like to get ahead of myself. But I guess if I could come up with anything as a response to why that still happens, it would probably be because you gotta, people don't like to bring up history, and they don't like, they just want to move on, and it's understandable. But historically speaking, Native Americans have been getting a kind of a short deal for a while, and haven't really been their opinions and their beliefs and their spirituality and all that stuff hasn't necessarily been taken seriously. So why not leave it with the Redskins? They're not organizing as a community to protest it. So or to get rid of it. If they gathered, I'm sure if members of the Native American community made it a priority for themselves, I would guarantee that there would be people who are non-native would join forces, if you will, make the change happen. So, but who knows whether that's happening or not? You can't necessarily trust our media outlets to tell us whether that's happening or not. But if there are issues with that, you got to organize. So, I'm just one guy. But as a group, we could do it. I'd sign a petition. I'd show up to a meeting or whatever, because I think it's a change. There are lots of things that are well established in this country, and at the time it was normal and appropriate. Segregation, that was normal and appropriate. But change came about, and it was like, yeah, we can't keep doing this. This is not right. And then it changed. Stealing. Yeah, okay, I'm not going to get into the ugly, not this time. But the same thing goes for for addressing this type of stuff. So if there is anybody who has any leverage or the means or the resources, I say you want to get rid of the Redskins name and logo. It's possible. I mean, I used to be stationed in North Dakota, and the University of North Dakota used to be known as the Fighting Sioux, right? And they had a similar logo as the Redskins, and the tribes up there banded together. They organized, they protested, they legislated, they did all that stuff that's required And now the UND Fighting Sioux are no longer the Sioux; they're the UND Fighting Eagles. So it's possible. Then again, that's a small market, and to go against an NFL franchise, that'd be a completely different bear altogether. So, but that just means you need a bigger group. Anyway, I'm done with my walk. We're 30 minutes in. I don't like to make these much longer than 30 minutes. Yeah, so I'm walking here too. At gmail.com is the email if you want to shoot me an email. Help me out with some content ideas, or provide some feedback or critique the material. I know I could use a lot of feedback, and I could probably use a lot of critiques as well. Yeah, there's a lot more that I could have said about that protest and disrespecting the flag and disrespecting the nation. Maybe I'll save that for another video also. But I think I've expressed everything that I could have, at least right now, within the constraints that I've put for myself. Anyway, thanks for tuning in, y'all. I promise I will get a haircut this week. You don't have to have all this stuff sticking out.